Hello everyone, welcome to our weekly bike scoop here at Performance Bicycle. This is our weekly show about the latest products, the newest technologies, the hottest trends, and pretty much anything that we're excited about here at Performance that we want to share with you. So today we're joined by Linus. Why don't you go ahead and tell everyone who you are?
Yeah, okay. So my name is Linus Owen Garney. I'm a product manager here at Performance for our components division. Quick background on me, I've been with the company for almost 7 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about. And then I've been in this particular role for the last 4 years. And
you pretty much just top level, you pick the assortment and you're the first person to hear all about the new components that are coming out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so kind of my job is to be sort of like the in-house expert, but also working with all of the great brands that we carry, Shimano definitely included. Very cool. Pretty excited about all this stuff. Yeah.
And today we're here to talk about the brand new Shimano Ultegra R8000 Groupset.
Yeah. So certainly a lot to like as it's coming out. Definitely one of the perks of the industry. We got to see this a good while back, and there was a lot to like in terms of some of the new features that they were bringing out with the Grupo. And just to kind of line out where sort of this fits into the whole array of parts that are out there. So I think a lot of people probably watching this are pretty familiar with Shimano as a brand, making very high quality parts, probably familiar with Ultegra too, but just so it's kind of couched and everybody knows where it falls in. At the very top tier of all of the performance, or all of the group sets that Shimano offers, you have at the very top end of the range Dura-Ace. And that's the kind of components that you'll find on professional bike racers' bikes in the Tour de France, those sorts of things. But right below that, you have Shimano Ultegra. And actually, if you take like a Dura-Ace rear derailleur and you hold it up next to an Ultegra derailleur, typically the physical designs of if you look at those two derailleurs, where the pivots are located, where the pulley wheels are, the lengths of the cages are almost identical between a Dura-Ace and an Ultegra derailleur. What you'll see is they'll just swap out some material. So in the example of the rear derailleur, the Ultegra derailleur has an aluminum cage, whereas the Dura-Ace model has a carbon cage. So there's a little bit of a weight savings. So long story short, when we're talking about Ultegra, you're really getting all of the performance and reliability that you would have out of the top of the line group set. You're just getting at a much more affordable price point and a little bit of a heavier weight spec.
Right. And what Linus is describing is what we refer to here as trickle-down technology. It's a term that's definitely thrown around in the bicycle industry a lot. But as the years go by and Dura-Ace is on the pro-level Grupos, as Shimano creates a new Dura-Ace, a lot of that technology from the old Dura-Ace Grupos trickle down into the next level, which here is the Ultegra. Right?
Yeah.
So trickle-down technology is something that's very important in the bike industry, and it helps folks like you and folks like us be able to provide great Grupos at a great value that are super high performing.
Yeah, for sure.
So real quick, how long ago, Linus, did you first get your eyes on this Grupo, and what were kind of like your top takeaways?
Yeah. So like I said, kind of like one of the perks of the industry is we get like a sneak peek sometimes into some of the new stuff that's coming down the pipe. This was definitely, I was really excited to see this. The first thing that I noticed definitely when I got to see it for the first time was a lot of the updates that they're making to the Ultegra Grupo. Like Zach said, that were based off of last year's introduction of the new Dura-Ace stuff. Certainly when we'll talk in a minute about the crankset and the shape of the arms and how the spider, and the crankset overall has been made lighter and stiffer. It's going to a shadow style rear derailleur. But actually, in terms of trickle technology, one of the cool things with the new Ultegra Grupo is they actually took some of like the things that they did with Dura-Ace last year and actually expanded on them for Ultegra. So if you look at like rear cassette capacity, like how big of a cassette you can put on, I think last year's Dura-Ace actually tops out at a 30-tooth cassette. The Ultegra stuff, actually you can go to a bigger range. So they kind of took some of the trends that they were seeing and actually kind of like in a couple instances where it makes sense for something like Ultegra, they actually kind of took a step forward that isn't in Dura-Ace. So definitely like trickle down technology like you're talking about, but you actually get a little bit more. There's more options with Ultegra that's pretty exciting.
Very cool. So this is Facebook Live. In case you're just tuning in, again, this is our weekly Bike Scoop show that we have every week. This is Linus from our components division. As you're watching, if you want to ask a question in the Facebook feed, we are keeping track of that. And we did just get one really good one in, asking if these components, if this new R8000 is backwards compatible. So can you just real quick explain what is backwards compatibility and how does that relate to this new R8000 Grupo?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually one of the things that I'm really excited about with this Grupo. So, you know, just like real quick, I've been like working in bike shops since I was like 15. Ultegra has been a staple of the components line ever since then. But, you know, when I started working in shops, 9-speed Ultegra, like 9 speeds, meaning you have 9 cogs on that rear derailleur, was kind of like what was the standard. And then every time they make like a generational update, so they went from 9-speed to 10-speed, none of that 10-speed stuff is really compatible with 9-speed. Then when they went from 6700 to 6800, that means the model name for Ultegra, we're still talking about Ultegra here, it went from 10-speed to 11-speed. None of the 11-speed backwards compatible with the 10-speed stuff. With this, the R8000 stuff is backwards compatible with Ultegra 6800, which is really exciting. So, you know, I touched on just a second ago some expanded cassette ranges, which we'll talk about in more detail in a little bit here. You can if you have a bike that's Shimano 6800, you can actually upgrade your rear derailleur and cassette and a few things and be able to take advantage of some of the new technology. So rather than having to maybe update your entire bicycle with new components, there's a lot more options and a lot more kind of paths to taking advantage of some of the cool new stuff without having to like swap out everything. So really cool. Yeah, it's a great question.
That's very cool. And to clarify though, this is an 11-speed Grupo.
Still 11 speed.
So it would not be backwards compatible with a 10-speed older Ultegra Grupo?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So so as long as it's an 11-speed system, it will be backwards compatible with that. And also worth noting that when you start getting outside of Dura-Ace and Ultegra, there's some compatibility issues. So there's resources, and certainly anyone in any one of our shops could help you out if you have any questions about compatibility. There's a lot of potential mixing and matching, but everything within 6800 Ultegra to the new R8000 Ultegra is back compatible, which is really cool.
Very cool. So I think now it's time to get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
So where do we want to start? Maybe with the Crankset? I mean, personally, when I show up to a group ride, I'm always like peeping people's cranksets to see what is that the first thing we should focus on?
Yeah,
or
should I be like watching this guy?
Is there way more important things that we need to talk about other than the aesthetics of the crankset?
No, just aesthetics.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, first of all, I mean, I say not just aesthetics, but it is a really good-looking crankset. So you know, the Ultegra crankset is a continuation of or I should say, it uses Shimano's Holotech 2 design, but it's just kind of updated to this new shape, and kind of there's some refinements to make. The thing that most people notice right away is just how much thicker the crank arm is here, where it connects to what we call the spider, which is what connects the crank arm itself to the chainrings. So Shimano, like they did last year with the new 9000 series Dura-Ace, they widened this area here. Let's see if I can Vanna White this very well here. There we go. This area here gets a lot wider, and that enables them to create just kind of a stiffer junction throughout all here. But before I mention that this is it uses Shimano's Holotech 2 technology, and what that really means is when they're manufacturing this crankset, there's kind of two ways to make stuff out of aluminum typically. The first is to machine it out of like a solid block of aluminum. So you start with a big block that's the shape, and then you cut out basically what you want. And that's a fine way to do things. The other way to do it is to forge things, which is where you take a blank, you put it in this huge kind of press thing, and you stamp it out into the shape that you want. Forging is typically much stronger, but it's also a lot more kind of like intensive, as you can imagine. So what's kind of remarkable with these cranks is that they forge these, but they forge them in such a way that they're actually hollow inside, which I'm not a material scientist or anything like that, but that's like not easy to do. So to like take this big, take a big piece of paper, like slam it together in a mold, and then like precisely manage the hollow space inside of it, so that you're optimizing it for stiffness, lightweight, all that sort of stuff is pretty remarkable. So that's kind of like inside of this, what you'll be seeing, as well as in the non-drive side crank arm. So this might look like kind of a thick piece of aluminum, but it's actually hollow inside. And because they're forging it, you kind of work harden the aluminum, and so you end up with a very lightweight part. Anytime you hear anybody in kind of with like bicycle components talk about making something stronger, usually it's actually not that hard to make something that's really strong. It's really hard to make something that's strong and light. And so if you can make the material stronger, that means you can use less of it. And so you can make the part lighter without having to sacrifice stiffness or durability or anything like that. So Crankset's super cool. The tooth profiling on the inside of the crankset also uses some ramps and pins here. So the shifts from the small ring up to the big ring are really effortless. There's also some new technology in the front derailleur that really aids with that front shift that we'll get into in a minute. But what you can kind of expect from this crankset is that it's going to shift really, really well. It's going to be super light and super stiff. Again, just kind of using some of that trickle-down technology from Dura-Ace. Another nice thing is that the spider, meaning the right side crank arm that the chainring's attached to, is the same between all of the different chainring configurations. So with a crankset, you can kind of buy the correct number of sprockets that you might, or the teeth on the chainrings rather. So this particular one's a compact, so you have a 34 tooth ring and a 50 tooth ring. They also make a 38 and a 52, as well as a 39 and a 53. But all of those different chainring configurations use this same spider. So if you wanted to switch from a compact to a standard crank, or a compact to a mid-compact, which are those sizes I was just talking about, you don't actually have to buy a new crankset. You can just buy chainrings instead, which is also pretty cool. So hopefully not geeking out too much for everybody, but that's what I do.
Very cool. And Christian, thanks a lot for the comment. Christian just said that he was wondering exactly what Holotech was. He turned on the audio, and you gave a crystal clear description.
Oh, cool.
So thanks a lot for that.
Yeah.
So that's the Crankset. I think probably one of the next most asked questions leading up to this was about the brakes. The brake set. What is it compatible with disc? Is it compatible with hydraulic disc?
Yeah. Okay. So
dual pivot. What's all the latest and greatest when it comes to the braking technology?
So yeah, that's a really great question. There's kind of many different answers to that, but I'll answer kind of what I think they're asking, which is that there's a couple of different actual versions of the R8000 group. What we have laid out here today is essentially what we call like the mechanical rim brake version of this Gruppo. So mechanical means that the derailleurs are actuated via cables, kind of the way that almost all of the bikes on the market are. The alternative to that would be Di2, which is electronic. And then it uses rim brakes rather than disc brakes. For the Ultegra Gruppo, there's basically 4 different kind of combinations you can have of that. Ultegra will be offered as you see it here, which is a more traditional bike with rim brakes and with a mechanical shifting layout. There also will be a hydraulic disc brake mechanical version, meaning again, the derailleurs are still actuated with cables and housing, like a traditional bicycle, but you'll have a fluid reservoir in the shifter, hydraulic lines going to disc brake calipers, and then there'll also be a rim brake Di2 version that instead of using cables to actuate the derailleurs, it will be cables actuating the brakes, but then electric wires and motors operating the derailleurs. And then the last version is a Di2 hydraulic system. So there's a lot of options out there. Really, if you're shopping for something like that, or if you're wondering which one's right for you, it's really going to be dictated by the kind of bicycle that you're looking to put it on. To be able to utilize disc brakes, the frame that you're using has to be made for disc brakes. Specifically with Ultegra, it's what's called a flat mount disc brake caliper. So the frame needs to be, the frame that you're like looking to put it on would need to be compatible with that. So again, a lot of different ways that you could go with, or a lot of different configurations to the Gruppo. It's really going to be a matter of like what fits on your bike. And again, any one of our shops can help you out, and we'll also, I'm sure, have some Learning Center resources to help you narrow that down to what the right stuff is for you.
And just personally, I'd chime in. I haven't ridden this new Ultegra set quite yet, but historically speaking, Ultegra has always given me confidence while descending in the mountains. It has superior stopping power, and I've never felt at risk, of not being able to stop really in any condition. Yeah.
So I mean, like specifically, since we are looking at the mechanical rim brake version of it, we can look at these in particular. I don't know about you, but I am like really particular when it comes to like my like handlebar sort of cockpit area setup, like the feel of the levers and all of that sort of stuff. So
kind of as soon as you kind of start to actuate it, you need to feel it, right? I mean, you
one
don't
of
want
the
a lot
things,
of
yeah. So one of the things that really kind of like when I picked these up for the first time and got to kind of just like do like that, was just how light the resistance is and how smooth the action is. So that means that there's plenty of spring tension inside of this to make sure that it will retract pretty quickly and snappy, I guess is kind of like the word that I've always used. But when you have it built up on a bike, especially when you're using Shimano's, the specific cables that they recommend to use for this that have a really high quality anti-friction coating on the cable and housing, the feel at the lever is just really, really good. And when you let go of the lever, they snap back. But when my bike's like dialed and like I squeeze the levers and everything feels good and the shifting action is smooth and everything's just working, it just like makes me want to ride my bike more. So usually when I have like parts on my bike that make me want to ride my bike more, I'm stoked. So and I think that's kind of like what this
one of the most common things that we see around the office is people will come around and see a bike, and the first thing that they typically go for are the brakes.
Yeah.
To feel how good the brakes are. And that's kind of like a precursor to whether or not the bike was put together well too. Right?
A little, yeah, for sure. I mean, and with Shimano too. I mean, they just have this dialed. Like, Shimano has always been my favorite like road caliper brake. Like I said, the feel is good. The power that they offer is pretty hard to beat. The compounds that they use in the brake pads just offer a lot of modulation. There's no ambivalence in it. Like you said, kind of like when you're descending or when you're just like riding, kind of like to get out of town, you want to be able to stop, but you want to most importantly have control. So having this is definitely like just their brakes have always been my favorite. So
as you guys can tell, we're kind of bike nerds here, and we will dive even deeper into conversations about brake calipers and levers.
For sure.
But in the essence of keeping on track, we're going to move forward and start talking about some more of the components. Again, this is Bike Scoop from Performance Bike, and we are live from the office here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And today we're with Linus. We're talking about the brand new Shimano R8000 Grupo that just came out. So we've talked about the crankset, we've talked about the brakes, we've talked about the shifters.
A little bit,
We'll dive some more into that, I guess. I think one of the biggest questions has been the cassettes, like what's the new range? I think there's a lot of big news here, and that the versatility that the cassette offerings give folks. I'm going to talk about it again because you're the expert, but I've heard all kinds of great stories about new cassette and how it has such a wide range that you could kind of almost put this on a mountain bike. I've heard that theory. Is that true?
Yeah, well, not really. Yeah, kind of. Sorry, I just tripped on my cord there. So yeah, if you're just joining us, like you came in like for the good part, when you were asking me earlier, like what jumped out at me about the new Grupo, like there's definitely the stuff we've talked about, but the biggest thing, and this is kind of like where Ultegra is really kind of like almost kind of leapfrog derailleur a little bit in terms of options, is the cassette sizes that they're offering. It's not just the cassettes. It's the combination of what they're doing with the cassettes and the rear derailleur. I'll talk about that in just a sec. But long story short, they offer the traditional cassette sizes that have always been available through Ultegra. They have the 1125, 1126, and 1128, which is probably the most common size out there. That's this guy here. But they're also offering an 11 by 30 and an 11 by 34, and that's the one that I get excited about. That's this guy here. The other thing that's really cool about the 1134 cassette, and I'm looking to see, yeah, we got it down here, is that, as some of you may know, when Shimano went from a 10-speed Grupo up to an 11-speed Grupo, that interfered with the compatibility for some older rear wheels. The way that a cassette works is that it slides onto a spline portion of the rear hub that lets it ratchet. But that spline that it slides onto is a particular length. And when they went to 11-speed, they required to be compatible with the wheel that spline get just like a little bit longer to essentially handle the extra tooth that they were putting on there. So for a lot of people, that meant that if you had like some really nice wheels, but they had a 10-speed free hub body, which is what that part's called, instead of an 11-speed free hub body, you basically like had to either rebuild the rear hub or get new wheels or do this sort of stuff. Also, mountain bikes mountain bike wheels use the same spline pattern, but they never extended past that 10-speed free hub body length. So what's really, really cool about the larger cassette sizes, the 11 by 30 and the 11 by 34, is that I'm just going to kind of take this guy apart real quick here, is that because this is so big, they were actually able to make this surface that mates against the end of the free hub body recessed behind this tooth here. So I don't know if you can see this well. This might not be coming through, but it actually it's almost like kind of concave on here, and this edge here is well inside of the edge of this tooth. And that's because the spokes of your rear wheel will still clear this tooth. And what it means is that for the R8000 group, you can actually run this cassette on a 10-speed free hub body or like a set of 29er mountain bike wheels. So like personally, I have like a gravel bike or whatever you would call it, adventure road bike. There's a lot of names for it now. With like 700 by 45C tires, and I use, for that bike, just for kind of giggles, I use a 29er mountain bike wheel set on it. And I was always kind of limited because I could never put an 11-speed road Grupo on there without having to run like an XT cassette or something else that wasn't necessarily optimized for a road group. So with this, not only can you use this Grupo with older 10-speed road wheels, you can also use them with mountain bike wheels with Shimano free hub bodies. So that is like super cool and really insightful. I kind of like, again, like you can't necessarily do that with the derailleur stuff. So another thing that this really has going for it, and one of the things that I was like most excited about when they announced it. Also, if you do have an 11-speed road, like a normal 11-speed road wheel set, it comes with like a little spacer that you would just use to take up that gap. So it's still compatible with either setup. So really cool. Like
super versatile.
Super duper versatile. You can like run it on a gravel bike if you really, maybe you're kind of like an XC mountain biker looking for a slightly lighter weight cassette and you don't need as big of a range. You know, lots of potential applications for this. So that was probably the thing that I was most excited about. I also just like in general kind of like putting together funky bike setups, and having more compatibility across different platforms is a huge plus for somebody like me. And I think if you're looking to build up a bike with easier gearing and all that sort of stuff, this is a fantastic option. That also kind of gets into the rear derailleur a little bit.
So let's hop into that front
rear
derailleur here.
Got propping it up. So this is probably, besides the crankset, the other, well actually it's a pretty major change. There's quite a few. But the biggest thing is just the overall shape of the derailleur has changed pretty significantly. They've gone to what they call their shadow style derailleur. And what that means is they've really changed the overall design of the derailleur. In the prior generation of Ultegra, you had a bolt here that was spring-loaded that threaded into the derailleur hanger. And that would provide the kind of the spring tension on the derailleur to kind of pull itself back here. They've replaced it and actually used a design very similar to what they do with their mountain bike derailleurs, which is called, again, the shadow style derailleur. And this guy here threads into the derailleur hanger. Or if you have a bike that uses what's called a direct mount, you can remove this little knuckle piece here and thread that directly onto your frame. And this actually just kind of locks the derailleur in a position, and the spring tension is handled just by the main spring and then the parallelogram here. So they've taken a lot of the technologies from their mountain bike derailleurs. They've changed the slant angle of this parallelogram a little bit. So it just kind of moves it follows a slightly different path. That's partially to accommodate the wider range of cassette sizes. It's also partially that if you're riding in really tough, rough terrain, again, like with a gravel bike or something like that, up and down bumps don't jostle the derailleur side to side as much. So it's a little bit more of a resilient design, a little bit more durable in kind of bad terrain. So, so that's a super cool thing. But the biggest thing is that the one I'm holding right now is what they call their GS rear derailleur. And what that really just means is that the length from this pulley to this pulley is longer, slightly longer. It's sometimes called a mid-cage. And that essentially is just to take up more chain slack so that you can run these wider cassette sizes. And then obviously the path that this thing kind of traces as it moves through the gears is optimized to match up with these wider gear ratios. So if you're using the mid-cage or GS rear derailleur, You can run anywhere up to the 34 tooth cassette. It's really optimized though for the 11x30 or the 11x34 cassettes. If you're running the SS, which is the short cage, that's really going to be optimized for like the 1128 to 1130 cassette size ranges. So you wouldn't really want to go over that with the SS. And actually, we'll double check that spec because I think it might max out at 28.
Gotcha.
Can't remember exactly, but that'll be in the follow-ups.
So we've covered just about everything. What else do we need to talk about? I think, are there any new updates to the front derailleur, and how about the shifters?
There are. I kind of like stopped myself a second ago when I was saying like this is like the main update, because actually like there's updates
Lots
kind of everywhere.
Main updates.
Lots of the most important update now.
And you guys can tell that we absolutely love this stuff. We love talking about this.
Yeah.
That's why it's been almost 30 minutes. So thank you for watching this.
It's been 30 minutes already?
We dive all the way into this. It's the deep dive that we're talking all about the specs and everything. Again, ask us any questions if you have any at all while we're here on Facebook, on the live thread. We can also answer them after the fact if you see this later. And so we'll continue the conversation here on the kind of the last bits of the Shimano R8000 group set here. Yeah,
really quickly. So the front derailleur got a really big update that the 9000 series derailleur got last year. Kind of the big changes, most notable by its absence. You have the prior generation derailleur had this big kind of arm that came out that the cable anchored to. That's been replaced by kind of a roller mechanism. It's a little hard to describe exactly kind of through the camera here, but essentially the cable routing works up here and then it wraps around a anchor attachment here, and it's actually kind of like a cam sort of system where it rotates. As you pull the cable, it rotates this mechanism and moves the derailleur out. So you're not relying on this big arm kind of hanging out there. Also, that arm kind of created some cable routing issues with different frames, and also depending on where the frame or the cable exited the bottom bracket, it would create pull ratio problems and all sorts of stuff. None of that you have to worry about with this guy because it just goes straight up, anchors down here. The other, by far the coolest thing though, is that you have this bolt here. For all the kind of like guy and gal home mechanics, it might look like an anchor screw adjustment, but it's not. It's actually a cable tension adjustment. As you screw this in, it turns that barrel and takes up slack in the cable. So what this derailleur does is it eliminates having to run like an inline barrel adjuster on your derailleur housing, like further upstream, kind of near your handlebars. So like I was saying earlier, I'm like really picky about like kind of my whole like handlebar cockpit shifter setup, and I hated having that inline barrel adjuster just to take up slack for adjusting the front derailleur. So this is built in, it's super compact, it's super clean, and even once you have that cable running, there's like this little cap that pops in to that area that actually has a little receptacle for you to stick the cable into so that it stays like extra tidy. So really cool feature and really easy to adjust, easy to set up, takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. Super cool. Snap that back on there. And then lastly, not a ton of updates here. These are the new Ultegra shifters. Some slight updates to the ergonomics, just kind of mostly with the textured area here, but and then also because they have changed that front derailleur design, the amount of lever throw that you have has been optimized a little bit, so you're not like pushing the whole thing way over. Yeah, so like the amount of throw that this has compared to the prior generation is a lot less. So it just makes that shift a lot easier, a lot faster, and more intuitive, and you're not having to like jam the whole thing over in kind of an awkward way. So that's kind of the long and short of it. That'll probably stay put.
Well, lots of really cool features again. So brand new Shimano Ultegra R8000, super versatile group. It's a great value. It's using trickle-down technology from previous derailleur generations, as well as new advanced technology that's specific just to the new Ultegra group set.
Right.
It's backwards compatible. It really works with all types of different bikes and different riding situations. And I, for one, can't wait to get on it down the road. So
yeah, I mean,
very excited.
It just works. I mean, like, you know, you talk to a lot of people about like what Shimano is all about, and it's just like Shimano stuff. It just works. And Ultegra, when you ask people what Ultegra is about, they say it just works, and that's definitely the case here. And again, all of the things you mentioned: backwards compatibility, bigger cassette ranges. It's super cool stuff. So check it out. It's in the stores now, so you should be able to go check this stuff out. If you're interested in upgrading or replacing your rear derailleur and cassette to take advantage of those wider gear ratios, we got it available now, so you should definitely check it out.
Very cool. So that's a wrap. Thanks again to everyone for tuning in. This is Bike Scoop. It's our weekly show live from the Performance Bicycle Warehouse in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Each week, Wednesdays, 3 p.m., we're going to be here talking about the latest and greatest trends, the newest bikes, the newest technology. So tune in with us next week, and we will see you then. And thanks again for watching.